All right, so we have talked about a lot of different types of energy, but now we're going to talk about how we can transfer that energy from one object to another. And so that's what we're going to learn about here. Basically, there's two different types. There's contact and non-contact ways of transferring energy, and this lines up pretty well with when we think about forces. We had contact and non-contact forces, so kind of the same idea here. But just as kind of a review, contact means one thing bumps into the other, or they're touching somehow or another. And so they touch. And so my example for you guys is the Hulk smashes some bad guys here. So he is touching them, and he's using some of his chemical energy to push them down to the ground. So he is making them move. So he's changing chemical energy into some kinetic energy. Or you might also think about it as he is using the kinetic energy in his fists to smash into the bad guys, and he gives them the kinetic energy. All right, our next contact way of transferring energy, or really this one is more for like heat energy, but it's a good one to think about because it comes into our lives a lot, and that is conduction. And so like I said, it's usually for heat or thermal energy. And what that is where heat is transferred directly from one object to the other. So that is a contact force. A contact way of transferring energy. And so it's usually going to be two solids. And my example for you on this one is you are frying an egg on the stovetop there. Now this is a little bit confusing because, all right, so we have the frying pan here, and it gets hot. And there's a couple different ways that could happen, but for now let's just say it's already hot. You put the egg on there, and now it heats up, right? And so that, since it's touching it, that is a contact transfer of energy. Now the reason it, cooks has to do with some other, that's more chemistry stuff, but there's some changes in the molecules there. We're not going to worry about that right now. Just know that since they're touching, it's conduction. All right, so now let's talk about some non-contact forces. So, we got Yoda using the force here to make the Emperor go flying, and he didn't touch him. Obviously, that's not real life, but, they're not touching, so kind of a good example there. So for non-contact, things are not going to touch, but energy is still transferred. So some examples that are real would be like magnets or gravity, or if you think about positive and negative charges attracting and repelling each other. Another example you might think about is the sun. So yes, we have gravity that makes Earth orbit around the sun, but what about the energy that we get from the sun? When you go outside and you feel the heat. So you're not touching the sun, so it's not conduction, but it's what we call radiation. So radiation is when we have energy transferred through electromagnetism, and we'll talk a bunch about that here in a few weeks when we get to our last unit about waves. But anyways, for radiation, think light, and that's kind of the easiest way to think about it for now. And so this is going to include things like radio waves, infrared, visible light, UV, X-rays, and more. You might be like, Mr. Schober, I didn't know those were all light. And I'll be like, cool, you learned something today. Also, I'm going to make a video specifically about radiation energy and how and electromagnetism, just to kind of get us ready for that next unit. But basically, there's a whole wide range of light. And what we see is just a very small part of it. But it includes things like radio waves, infrared, UV, which is ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays that we talked about way back in the beginning of the year. Our last one is convection, and this is where we have energy transferred either through a liquid or through a gas. So, one example would be your hair dryer heats up the air and it blows it out, and then that air, you feel the hot air on your face or on your hair, and that's what dries out, dries your hair out. So you might, it's kind of a good question. Is convection contact or non-contact? And maybe I'll ask you to think about that. But some examples of that are weather, inside the earth, water boiling, and we'll make another video about this too because it's kind of cool what we can see there. So those are the main ways that we can transfer energy from one object to another. And like I said a couple times in there, we'll have some more pointed questions or support pointed videos to get into that, and I'll have some assignments about those as well.